Hey, I'm Brad.
And I'm Dylan.
Welcome back to Overkill Reviews. I'm sure you know it's BangerTV's weekly heavy metal review show. The last time that Dylan and I were in the same video together was for a What We Missed video, and we had a lot of fun, and it was really, conversational. I was just chatting with my friend about music. He showed me how to drum Bleed by Meshuggah. It was a good time. And
Are you still practicing that?
No, I lost it, unfortunately. But we had a good time, so we wanted to do it again. So we're glad to be here. Hopefully you enjoy it, because we had to jump through a lot of hoops to make it happen, distance. So hopefully you'll like it.
Mm-hmm. Before we dive into today's video, one of our longtime Patreon donors, Greg Almeida, he would like us to shout out Dan Swano's first solo album, Moon Tower, which came out back in the late 90s, as well as Ashbury's Endless Skies. Really two solid progressive rock and metal albums. So if you're a fan of that kind of style of music like I am, definitely check out those two records. And Greg, if you're watching, I'm going to try and convince them to do an Overkill Unearthed of In the Court of the Crimson King or Foxtrot by Genesis. I don't know if you can see the vinyl in the background, but there it is. So yeah, as much as I love to talk about some prog, today we're going to be talking about some metalcore.
That's right. This is the new album from Architects. It's called For Those That Wish to Exist, and it's out today on Epitaph record.
Now, I must admit, first time I listened to Architects, it was way back in high school. I always thought they were a very solid metalcore band, but never really a band I would go out of my way to see. I think if they were on tour with a band that I really liked, I definitely would check out their set. But yeah, I just always thought they were kind of just a good metalcore band.
Cool. I mean, I'll take it from there. Then I've seen them a few times. I've been following them for quite a while. So I'll do this a more in-depth bio, so to speak. So they formed in 2004 in Brighton, in England. I think the first time that I read about them was in an alternative press magazine. Bring Me the Horizon was in it as well. I think it was kind of like a feature on like up and coming like UK metal, hardcore, and rock music. And back then they were leaning pretty like a lot more mathcore, pretty chaotic and whatnot. And then gradually over their first three albums, they added a little bit more more bouncy elements onto the album Hollow Crown, which is kind of like the perfect in between from what they'd become and the chaotic band that they were. That album it's awesome. The album after that, they kind of ditched that sound entirely on the Here and Now. They went in like a lot more of a post-hardcore direction, and it kind of alienated fans. But they kind of developed this like bouncy sound that you've come to know and love, or not love if you're wrong. So that, they kind of were able to bridge the gap between people who like the bouncier stuff, like the gent kids or whatever, and people who don't really care about the guitar tone that you just dialed in on your pod, like no big deal.
I guess just to kind of go off of that point, kind of bringing up the gent thing, I think the last record, Holy Hell, was definitely one that caught my attention with adding a lot more kind of gent elements to it. And I know I've kind of been like on the fence of whether or not that's kind of like a genre or not, but you know what? I think it is. I think there's enough bands now that kind of made it a genre. That record, Holy Hell, was super, super solid. It had a lot of really cool, catchy songs, and it made me kind of give this band a second chance kind of listening to them.
So I got to go back a little bit in the bio. They put out an album, Lost Forever, Lost Together, which has probably my favorite song of the post the Here and Now era, in a song called Gravedigger. Really catchy, really heavy. Like the chorus is awesome. Unfortunately, tragedy struck after follow-up All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us when one half of the band-forming twin duo, Dan and Tom Searle, passed due to cancer. Rest in peace, Tom. So they would eventually regroup after that, and then they would release the follow-up, 2018's Holy Hell, their first without Tom, which Dylan touched on earlier. So for Dylan, he's really excited for this album because he liked the last one a lot. For me, I'm never not excited for an Architects album. It's always welcome, but it's very rarely a surprise. It's always well done, but I usually pretty much nails what I think it's going to sound like. So I'm never like, what? What? This album is the first what that I've gotten from these guys since they softened it up on the Here and Now and then brought it heavy again on Daybreaker.
So the record starts off really strong with the track Black Lungs. It has a really just solid groove throughout the whole entire track, and all the other instruments really build off of that one initial groove. And it may sound boring to kind of base your whole song around one thing, but if it's really musically interesting, it's very effective. The chorus has a really nice subtle string elements that kind of add a nice texture to it, and the breakdown is super, super heavy.
Hey, can I talk about the chorus for a second? Because for me, the chorus,
go for it.
The chorus really does it for me as well. It's one of my favorites on the album. I've seen a lot of people online saying that they prefer Animals, but for me, like, this is like the chorus on this album. But I'm getting too excited to hear Mr. Progboy talk about a breakdown. So talk about the breakdown a bit more.
Well, it's one of those moments where when the breakdown really hits, it kind of feels like a boxer winding up for like the big knockout punch. When the haymaker hits, it's super heavy. It just grabs your attention right away. So you're excited to hear the rest of the tracks to follow from a track like Black Lungs.
Actually, I mentioned Animals earlier, and I want to talk about that song now. You talking about how they build Black Lungs around, a recurring riff reminds me of like the motif that they have here with, it's just like it just chugs along, and it really pushes the song along. For me, though, like the best part of the chorus is in the background where it's like, ooh, ooh. I'm not a singer, so whatever. In the background, that's what really makes it to me, man. Partway through the breakdowns, like these sirens come in, and for me, the guitars in the breakdown kind of recall that the main chugging riff, but also the sirens kind of subtly recall the ooh, ooh. So it's like the breakdown is like a summation of some of the better elements throughout the song, but in the breakdown, which is, typically, one of the better parts of a metalcore song. And I also, loved that right before it comes back into the final chorus, it goes like, but yeah, then it's like a knockout punch, like you said, with that breakdown, that it comes in, boom. Yeah. Awesome song.
Yeah. I mean, when I was listening to Animals, I thought I didn't really grab my attention. Unlike tracks like Giving Blood, which has just this really, really wicked tom groove, and it has a lot of really kind of interesting parts. And sometimes, like, I know in some of my reviews, I kind of like over musician-splain a lot, but sometimes I just can't help it, right? It's got some really cool subtle ideas of like electronic music and the choir and the kind of reverse cymbal swells that they add to that track. It's just a lot of those kind of like subtle things that they add make it a lot more musically interesting song than I would say like a track like Animals. I just prefer the more kind of like more technical and more, I guess, groovier side of it.
You say like they get right to the chorus. Like not only do they get right to it, the song starts with it. Like the opening riff is the opening riff is in the chorus. And then the first verse they kind of like, it's kind of like a half verse, so that they can get right to the chorus again to really like really lock that hook in. Like really, they tease it with the opening riff, then they do a half verse and then chorus just to like be like, all right, now this is stuck in your head, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying?
Another great track on this album was Dead Butterflies. One thing that I loved was the horn sections that really jump out at you during the intro. Really reminds me of a Canadian band called The Kindred, and it just has a ton of like great dynamics. The tremolo picking section, the way it builds to the bridge. There's just a ton going on, and Sam's vocals are just crushing on this. There's so much emotion in his voice. You can hear like the cracking of his voice in the chorus part. It's just one of those songs that really kind of sticks with you. And it's a track that I keep going back to every time I re-listen to this record.
I really like that, the guitar solo sounds like it's almost like underwater. It reminds me of something from Blood Flowers by The Cure, which is my favorite album by The Cure, by the way. It's kind of, it feels like a thing that a lot more like a lot of rock bands do, which, this album is definitely trending towards rock for these guys at least. Like it's still, it's definitely still got metalcore elements, but it's trending more that direction. And you mentioning the horns earlier, it kind of has like almost like a really like royal, like regal kind of feel, but like in a mournful way, like in a like,
yeah,
I don't know, like
a little bit, yeah.
Like you're about to crown the new king, but the reason that you're crowning a new king is because the previous one got killed in battle. So there's a little bit of like it's triumphant, but it's sad, And there's
you kind of came up with your own like analogy for the whole song. That's kind of sick.
Yeah, hell yeah. And there's a similar kind of royal vibe on Impermanence, and I'm gonna talk about that now. Of course, the guy who likes metalcore and grew up listening to a lot of metalcore and whatnot would want to talk about the song with Winston McCall from Parkway Drive on it, but god damn it, I'm gonna do it anyway.
Again and again and again and again and again. Even the doomed refuse. We were born to lose. Do you really wanna live forever? 'Cause those afraid to die will never truly live. They'll never truly live.
I really like that Winston when he does his like full like brash like brunt yell, it hits really hard, and it's kind of at odds with Sam's vocals, which are, I don't know if the words, the pensive isn't necessarily the right word, but like it always sounds like there's emotions behind it that aren't anger, but when Winston goes like full blown, he just sounds pissed. So it's a really nice contrast, and it makes it hit really hard. And I also like how they have the guitars that pan back and forth like chugging, and it feels very like early mid 2000s metalcore, when Parkway Drive came up, and that I love when a band includes a guest in a way that really suits them, and I think that does really suit Winston.
The negative thing that I find about this record is definitely that the first part of it is definitely a lot stronger than the second half. What I wanted to hear from this record is kind of the more prog elements kind of expanded upon.
Big surprise, buddy. Big surprise. Dylan wants more prog.
Well, of course, right? I mean, like, it did add some prog elements in the first half, which I really liked, and it's kind of the things that I was expecting to hear from this record. But then the second half of it just feels like it just follows into the same kind of formula where it's like intro, verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown. It just gets kind of predictable. It's not boring, but it's not like, it doesn't grab my attention immediately like the first half did.
To me, the second half just has more of like a more of a moody feel, whereas the front half is a lot more driving. And if I'm,
that's fair.
but I do enjoy the flow of the whole album with like the moodier back half. If I'm going to listen to the whole album, I think it does work when you have time to sit down. If you got an hour, sit down and listen to the whole thing. It definitely works. If you're trying to jam out a little bit and then you've got to catch the bus in 20 minutes, you're probably going to turn on a few of the songs on the first half.
I think what I wanted from this record was like the attention throughout the whole album, and it just feels like sometimes when you don't have songs that are not as memorable, like Dead Butterflies or Black Lungs, it just feels like when you set the standard so high for a record that has those two really solid songs, and then the other songs are just kind of then it doesn't really feel like it's a complete record. It just feels like they just added a lot of filler because we need to make it over 35 minutes to make it an album. It feels like if it was an EP and they just kept those songs from the first half as just its own thing, it would be, my opinion, probably better than Holy Hell. One thing I did notice about this album is that they have a lot of electronic elements to it, and sometimes it can be used as more of like a soundscapey kind of approach to it, which is a lot more interesting. But sometimes they add it in this kind of techno-ish thing, and it really kind of takes you out of it, especially if you're not a fan of techno like I am. Come on, man. You could think of something more creative than just kind of the uncy parts.
Well, it's funny because I think on In Ordinary Extinction it has that vibe, but I don't personally mind it because it's buried relatively low in the mix, and to me it kind of complements the chugs. It's not the driving force. It's kind of it's the smooth pavement underneath that makes the drive as it is. That's a fucking terrible analogy, but fuck it, I don't care. Anyway,
no, it's all good. It's all good.
The chorus also has a part where I'm like, is that a guitar? Is that a synth? Is that, I don't know. So I like when when you start to question like where something starts and where the other thing ends. I like that.
Overall, I think it's a solid album. I don't think it beats Holy Hell. I do wish that the prog elements were expanded upon a bit, but then again, they're kind of a metalcore band, and once you hear a little bit of those elements, you're kind of hoping that they kind of make the move, but at the same time, they know how to write songs that appeals to their fan base, and if I was more a fan of metalcore, I think I would appreciate this album a lot more, but for somebody who's kind of like an outsider to Architects, I still think that this is a good album, but it doesn't beat Holy Hell. Yeah, therefore, I'm just going to give this a 3.5 out of 5 skulls.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be accusing these guys of copying Bring Me the Horizon, abandoning metalcore, going a lot more rock, commercial, whatever. And I think that's a little bit of, it's simultaneously fair and it's unfair. Architects kind of jumped the ship on metalcore back when they did the Here and Now, the post-hardcore album, and then they came back. So I feel like those two bands have kind of been dancing around each other for their entire career, kind of simultaneously steering the genre of metalcore and where it goes and how much of it gets retained in the sound, or if they elements get pulled back. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, yes, there are similarities for sure, but to deduce this down to a Bring Me the Horizon following move, I think that's like unfair. They're both incredibly influential bands who I think play off each other a lot. I probably first heard them in high school like you did, but I kind of kept up with them a little bit more. So I've for me, I've heard, the last 4 albums, post the Here and Now, basically, where they've kind of dialed into this sound and done it very well. They're, basically, who's better at doing Architects than Architects? Like, nobody, So for me, I've heard them do that, subtle changes here and there, but for the last 4 albums. So for me, like a more drastic change here is definitely very welcome. So for that reason, I'm gonna go a little bit higher. I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. Shoutout time.
Yeah, so there's a couple of albums that I've been really looking forward to, as well as been listening to the past couple weeks. First up, I would like to recommend Evergrey's brand new album, Escape of the Phoenix. Then next up, we have Fractal Generator with their brand new record, Macrocosmos. And then especially, I want to give a shout out to Demon King, The Final Tyranny. They're kind of like a symphonic death metal band. Just started listening to them. Really cool stuff.
It's funny that you mentioned Demon King because the day that they released the first song from that project, Brand of Sacrifice, who I work with, they're on my shirt. You already know about them. They released a song called Demon King on the same day that Demon King the band released their first song. So that was funny. I've actually got the Brand of Sacrifice PS5 here. You could have a chance to win if you pre-order their new album, Lifeblood, out next week. It's really good. Anyway, on to less conflict of interest shoutouts. We've got Summoning the Lich and their album United in Chaos, which is like, if you like Black Dahlia Murder, you're gonna like this. And then we've got Culted and their album, I think it's Nous, Nous. It's like blackened industrial doom stuff. I just premiered it yesterday on Acclaimed, so you can definitely listen to it on your DSP of choice. But if you want to read my write-up, that'd be really cool. Go to acclaimed.ca now.
Well, if you haven't checked out Sowen's new record, definitely check that out. Hatalom is great. Just discovered them on Bandcamp. I think they have some really cool stuff. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos that we have.
Beyond that, we are going to say, please join us on Patreon if you have the financial means to. If not, no worries. We do a lot of cool exclusive stuff over there. That being said, subscribing to the YouTube channel is enough because we have a lot of really fucking cool stuff coming up. So do whatever you can. Either way, we appreciate you. We'll be back. See you later. Thank you very much.